Hello, and thank you for watching my presentation on the subprime mortgage crisis. Forgive any technical difficulties. I'm working with a slightly old computer, but alas, on with the show. I'm Jacob Conger from Bethel University, and today I'll be casting blame on somewhat of an unusual target that played a key role in this crisis, the borrower. First, let's set the stage. The booming 90s is behind the United States, and the age of information is really taking shape. Jobs are on the up and up, education is more attainable than ever, and interest rates are at an all-time low. What could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a lot, actually. It is true to an extent that a demand creates supply, and in the early 2000s, the hot product was mortgage loans. You see, what happened is the value of houses continued to increase, constantly increasing the demand for loans to buy them. This led to a housing bubble, which eventually had to pop. What is this? Now, most accuse the lenders of most, if not all, the flow. I mean, just look at Google here. When I went to start researching this presentation, this is the first thing that I saw. Bam, look at that. Blaming just one party, though, is unfair and leans to not recognizing other real flaws. I claim this goes doubly so for the borrower in this particular crisis. Let's talk about some facts. Not all borrowers was as innocent as they'd have you love to believe. In fact, as much as 70% of early payment defaults in this crisis were by borrowers who engaged in fraudulent borrowing, according to Base Point Analytics. How they did this was some borrowers would report their earnings as up to 5 times as much as they were actually making, or simply using their very new computers would alter any official documents that they had to sign and hand over to receive this money. Additionally, a large percentage of this population were not even subprime borrowers. To quickly define, a subprime borrower is one with a very low credit score and or a very low income, likely to default on a loan, if you will. While it is true that in the early stages, aka 2003, most loans were held by subprime borrowers, estimated to be somewhere up to 71%. By 2006, Adelino, a finance professor at Duke University, reports that this percentage was reduced to only 39%. The difference is accounted for both by regular home or tentative home buyers like you and me, and also high income borrowers looking to buy and sell houses for profit. Perhaps most critically, though, in this finance student's humble opinion, was the sheer speed at which all of this happened. Home buyers who were looking to take out loans were practically racing into these loans, not taking the time to do their own research. This is something I want to talk about in particular. There's a lot of violated principles here, and let's talk about some of those morals that got violated. While it is hard to fault somebody for wanting a house, I mean, hell, I want a house. It's very easy to fault someone for misuse of resources. Americans at this time were taking too much advantage of available funds and not saving anywhere near enough. This created a situation where eventually the Fed would have to increase the interest rate to decrease spending. And of course, this all ties into fraud, which plays a role in both stewardship principles and biblical principles. From a stewardship standpoint, you are obligated to use resources at your disposal correctly and not use them fraudulently to your advantage. You're basically taking away from future generations. Biblically, of course, fraud is almost a one-to-one with lying and cheating, right? And we have these in commandments that we're not supposed to engage in any kind of activity like this. Additionally, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about debt, which is sort of ambiguous in Christianity, but sloth really is not. Traditionally, Christianity has no fault with debt as long as you are making sure that you can pay it or that you will have the means to pay it. Now, this kind of plays into sloth, which is very much talked about. This is a grievous sin in the Bible, to be lazy and not do your due diligence. Meaning, I am saying by sitting around and not engaging in the research and not engaging in pre-planning, these borrowers were kind of riding with the tide and just rushing into these home loans, because they thought that they could, and they thought that the economy would continue that the way it was. Therefore, they didn't take the necessary precautions to make sure they had the means to be able to pay off these loans, just being very lazy. This is all very critical, so I'd like to cut these loaners a little bit of slack. People aren't perfect, and there are some ideas and ideals that make this situation a little bit harder, such as America's reliance on specialization. Pictured here is Henry Ford, commonly credited with creating the assembly line. Oh, I'm sorry. Pictured here is Henry Ford. He's commonly, cited for inventing the assembly line. The assembly line is widely praised for really moving America into what we consider like the modern industrial age, right? Specialization is what did that. You had each person at each station doing their one job. They could do that job really well. Now, what's the downside of this? Well, look at these photos. What do you see here? Some of you might see a young man who's really passionate about coffee and really engaged in the community, but what I see is a kid who has no idea how to change his oil. I have no idea. If my car broke down on the side of the road tomorrow, I'd just have to sit there. My point in all of this is that Americans, being very educated in their field and doing work in the economy through their work, wouldn't have known how loans worked and how the economy comes together and works, and would be more willing to believe people that were lending them the money and less willing to do their own research. Additionally, at this time, internet innocence was still a really big thing. Internet innocence refers to that period of time where people still didn't quite understand the internet yet. It was still pretty new, still very mistrusting of the internet, and still very trusting of the internet. That's why you got to be safe. You got to read very carefully on the internet and interpret at your own risk. What's really important from all of this is what they could have done better and what we should do better in the future. What we're seeing today is more interest dips. We've all been seeing it. Houses are going way, way up in cost, but the interest rates are going way, way, way down. I was at my own bank the other day, and the guy was pushing me to a mortgage loan because the interest rate is super low. And this is the modern land grab. People are trying to buy as much land as possible. Not so much in America as in other less developed countries, and clear-cutting forests and trying to put up buildings, Now, here are my references. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching this, and that's it for me.